Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Luke from Chakra Awakening. Thank you for joining me for another video. This video is all about the Mars-Pluto-Jupiter alignment that's happening very soon. This is a pretty dynamic astrological alignment, and doing research for this particular video, I went back in history to look to see when the last time such an alignment took place. So has there ever been a point in the last 123 years, because I went back to the start of 1900s, to see when Pluto has been opposite Mars or Mars opposite Pluto with Jupiter in square? And the answer is no. This alignment hasn't happened in the last 123 years. Prior to that, I didn't go back and look because it's a tedious, long task. There is a Jupiter square Pluto alignment happening roughly every 6 or so years. In fact, the last ones were December 2016, July 2010, August 2004. So, roughly every 6 or so years, we have a square from Jupiter to Pluto. Every 2 or so years, we have an opposition from Mars to Pluto. When do we have Mars in opposition to Pluto with Jupiter in square? Now, we don't. So, post-eclipse, or in the middle of Mercury retrograde, only for a couple more days, are you feeling stuck and stagnant? Are you feeling demotivated or flat? Are you feeling like it's just like, a little bit of a drag? This aspect is a bit of a shift of that energy and a bit of a dynamic shift. And dynamic means that it can be quite explosive and disruptive. It can be quite volatile. When we're dealing with Mars, we're dealing with aggression. We're dealing with anger, assertion. If you look at the tarot card for Mars, it's the Tower card where, this false reality is being crumbled down by one quick lightning strike. And all of a sudden, all of the false idol, the Tower of Babel, is coming crumbling down. And it's this illusory idea of reality. And when Mars confronts the trumpet card, Pluto, right? Pluto's blowing the trumpets and raising the bodies from the dead. When Mars confronts or conflicts this energy, there's this sort of eruption that can happen. And now that every 2.5 years, you could see there's a time where there's amplified volatility, a lot of conflict when it comes to what you want versus what someone else wants, and try and reconciling those differences. But if we now throw Jupiter moving into fixed Earth Taurus into the mix, this really just amplifies things. Now, Jupiter always gets, it's benevolent, it's expansion, it's growth, it's fortune, it's luck, it's, abundance. And yes, Jupiter can amplify things, but if there is something going on that's negative or difficult or a challenge, Jupiter can amplify that negativity, that difficulty, and that challenge. So Jupiter doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to be good. It just means that sometimes things are going to be bigger. Sometimes it can be the mountain out of the molehill, exaggeration of energy. Now, Jupiter is going to be moving into Taurus as it leaves Aries. It's going to cross over that critical 29th degree of Aries, which is where we just had the solar eclipse on the 20th of April. And I come back to that point when we have a look at this chart for Australia in particular. If in your life at the moment, there is some simmering stuff going below the surface, if you're feeling like, you're having to push down the truth and repress it or hide from it, distract yourself or avoid it, this aspect is the liberation of that energy. When these types of planetary alignments occur in the cosmos above, as above, so below, the macrocosm versus the microcosm, we can expect that this energy is going to sort of play out in our lives in some particular way. Now, very significant for those born late cardinal sign, early fixed sign. So that is late Aries, late Cancer, late Libra, late Capricorn, or early Taurus, early Leo, early Scorpio, and early Aquarius. In particular, the birth dates for those people would be the 19th and 20th of April, the 22nd and 23rd of July, the 23rd and 24th of October, and the 20th and 21st of January. In particular, those particular dates. Why? Well, firstly, because this is where that dynamic energy is going to play out. And we're on the 12th of May as I do this video. If I move forward, it really starts like Jupiter first is the first planet to cross the threshold into the fixed sign. First time in 12 years, we're going to have Jupiter in Taurus. Now, Taurus does rule over, in one sense, our values, our possessions, the wealth of people, the wealth of a nation often, money, and the stock exchange in particular. Now, we've already got Uranus in Taurus. We've got a lot of volatility in the global economic systems, the financial systems, the banking systems. There's already a lot of volatility as indicated by Uranus's transition. The last time Uranus was in Taurus was at the end of the Great Depression, and that period between the Great Depression and the Second World War. So Uranus back in that particular spot. Now, if things were looking rosy economically and the outlook was great and, there was economic prosperity, we could imagine that Jupiter's transition into Taurus would be good, a good thing. It would be the amplification of that energy. And we could look and feel like abundant and growth and expansion to our values, our possessions, our wealth, our money. But if you look around the world and if you look at the cost of living pressures, if you look at the way people are, that most people in general are in some level of financial stress. They're not abundant and feeling free. And I say as the majority. Now, there is always exceptions to the rule, but as a bit of a net you cast over the collective, I would say that the economic disparity between those with have and those that don't is ever growing. The middle class is being eroded. And it tends to be the sort of amplification of the mega rich just becoming richer and richer and richer. In fact, if you look at the mega rich people of the world, where everyone was locked out of their work and was struggling through COVID and was not allowed to travel and businesses closed and all those things, yeah, the mega rich, expanding their wealth because, that's what they do. They have the inside knowledge. So I would say that Jupiter's transition into Taurus isn't going to be a year or so, because it's going to spend a year or so in Taurus of, great economic times. I would say that Jupiter is going to amplify this instability that we're already having. We might be moving towards some sort of economic crisis or a collapse or a transition. We might have a banking crisis in particular. So, and if you think about banks, right? Banks are what? Banks are on the edge of the river. So when the banks dissolve or when the banks collapse, what happens? The river overflows. So you could sort of understand that symbolism as we move into this sort of very dynamic period. If I was to look ahead, we're either on the brink of an economic transition to a digital currency, global digital currency, or central bank digital currency, or we're on some type of edge of transition. Perhaps, a collapse has to happen in order for that to take place. Now, astrologically, if this hasn't occurred by, sometime next year, I think that it's going to be 2024 will be that year. If I was to look astrologically where we're at currently, I would say that this alignment over the next few weeks between now and the end of May and early June, if we make it through this period without that type of thing happening, then I would say we're probably going to be in some sort of calmer waters until sometime next year. The if part is with this particular aspect. Here we have on the 17th of May, Jupiter moving into Taurus, squaring Pluto in Aquarius. Now, the interesting thing is that Jupiter is really amplifying that eclipse degree, 29 degrees of Aries, the first degree of 0 degrees of Taurus. So Jupiter really amplifying what was going on for the eclipse back in April of this year. The other interesting thing is that Pluto's sitting at the degree of the grand conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn that took place on the winter/summer solstice, 21st of December in 2020, which marked a real turning point and transition. So Pluto sitting on that particular significant critical degree is interesting because Pluto, remember, it's the trumpet card. So when Pluto blows the trumpet, it's almost like raising of the dead and bringing from the underworld, Hades, the unconscious, the shadow, into consciousness. And through Aquarius, This is the collective consciousness of the people, humanity, our social cohesions, and the way in which we come together, hopefully through unity, not, we find common good rather than always focusing on the things to divide us. And then bring Mars into the picture. So on the 17th of May, this alignment is taking place with Jupiter and Pluto, but that's going to be in play for a week or two. If you think about Pluto-Jupiter tension of this square is like this big tense energy, that I would say the three big planets as far as power is concerned, in astrological terms, would be Pluto, Jupiter, and Mars. Absolutely. Very, very powerful energy. Pluto, or plutonium, is the ingredient in the atomic bomb. Mars, known as the god of war, and Jupiter is that might and power energy, like it's just explosive and expansive. So as we get into the 21st of May, we have Mars crossing the threshold into the fixed sign, and that creates this T-square between Jupiter in Taurus, Mars in Leo, and Pluto in Aquarius. And over here, in opposition and square to those energies, is the South Node in Scorpio, a big karmic release. If we imagine that this was a bow and arrow and this was being pulled back here, this tension, it's almost like the arrow is being released down here. So Scorpio South Node energy. So like what from the past is coming up from the depths of Scorpio through Pluto energy to be released, so to create this sort of karmic transition. And this is happening right at the end of these sort of eclipse season that we've gone through. And remember, eclipses tend to open these energetic energetic periods of time that in the New Age they like to call portals, for a 6-month sort of period. So the solar eclipse, 20th of April this year at 29 degrees of Aries, is sort of like a new moon that seeds this 6-month period. And within that period, a lot of shifts and changes and energy can be released. That's also, karmically aligned to the past and the future. Ooh, it's a big one. It's a big one. So, and this is falling as Mars transitions into Leo. It's only a day or so after the new moon in 28 degrees of Taurus as well. So we're going to have this new moon energy. So you could say that this aspect is not only going to be very dynamic for the peak period between the 19th, 20th, 21st of May, but also through the whole month of Gemini as we move through that month in particular. So on a personal level, it's time to confront the truth, trying to let that truth liberate the fixed energy where you're feeling stuck. Where, when we get to this type of crossroad, the destination is the same. It's the path we take to get there. And with this type of alignment, it means that you can walk down one path, which is to keep doing the same thing, keep pushing it down, holding it, feeling like you can just deny it. But when you're denying that ultimate truth, that truth of the soul, right, it's going to find a way to express itself in your life. And if you repress and think that you just go along and, try and keep it together, often it leads that path to transformation through crisis. That could be a health crisis. It could be some blow up or huge event that takes place to liberate that repressed energy. The other path, the high road, the path least trodden, that's the path of self-transformation. That's where you just honor your truth and you allow it expression. You bring it from the underworld and into the conscious reality, and you express your truth, and it'll set you free. And the pathway that's the high road is a liberating path that ends up putting you in a place of power, and you hold your integrity and your sense of morals are intact through that process. The destination's the same. This stuff's going to shift and stuff's going to come to light. And, I feel like that's probably a good thing for the vast majority of people, is this shifting and liberation of stuck or stagnant or fixed energy. Now, I've spoken about this before, so we have another 3 different ways to look at this particular energy, and that's in relation to the geopolitical perspective, the economic, which I've touched on briefly, and also the geological perspective. And in those cases, I would say that what we would look for with this particular alignment is where there is brewing conflict, maybe volatility within that, And now there's already tensions with China and Taiwan. There's already tensions in the Middle East, and there's an ongoing conflict with Russia and Ukraine. So in those particular areas, I'd be looking for flash ups or explosive points or things happening, right? So if you're in those areas, obviously take care, but it's about having awareness, right? It's about being aware of what's going on. There's also the likelihood of this unexpectedly happening in other locations closer to home, even US as well. So just things to keep an eye on. It's a time when it comes to living in your community and your reality that in general, people are going to be way more volatile than they are and probably unpredictable in their reaction to what's going on, whatever it is for them. So be mindful of that. Don't fuel the fire, and don't disengage from areas that aren't, like, don't fight someone else's battle. Don't be the hero in this particular case. Become the observer and witness it. If there needs to be intervention, be mindful in the ways in which you do that. And you don't fight fire with fire in this instance. You fight fire with water. So show compassion, have some love. But also recognize that if it's not your battle, put down your sword. Walk away if you have to. And it's not always going to be that way. But for the next, till the end of this month, just pick your battles. You've been warned. Pick your battles. From a economic perspective, anything goes. Anything goes. I'm not an economic expert or guru, and especially from an astrological perspective, I'm not a financial astrology. I sort of look into certain things and have my own beliefs and perspectives, but seek out someone that's more advanced in that, their knowledge in that area. But I would say that we could expect some upheaval, some volatility, some unexpected energy to manifest in relation to the monetary system, the banking system, and the stock market. So when it comes to personal advice, what you do with your own finances, you need to seek professional advice. This is in no way, this is entertainment purpose only. This is in no way me telling you what to do. What I will say is this: if it were me and I had a whole lot of money and I had it in the bank, I probably want to diversify that out of the bank. I want to put it into something like fixed assets or something that had some tangible value that I could actually point to and say, I actually have possession or ownership of that. There is a very high probability of a bank run. If there is any sort of more banking sector collapse or structural issues within that area, what will happen is that people will go into panic, and what do? They rush to the ATM or the teller and they try and withdraw their money. And if that happens en masse, the government will intervene and they'll put a freeze on withdrawals. So if you've got a shitload of money in the bank, the next thing you can't access it. So that's a high probability. If that doesn't happen through this period of time, then perhaps we plan for something like that potentially taking place in 2024. But over the next 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, I would say it's pretty good, time over the next 2 weeks and beyond. I would say it's like, have your little supply there. If the likelihood of a transition in the economic system, and all of a sudden there's a bank collapse and then it triggers this sort of transition into a new economic system, and you had like, say, 100 grand in the bank, and now we move to a new system, what's that going to be worth? How do you transition? Can you transition? Like, all of those questions, they're unknowns. So, I don't have the answer to that, but it's obviously, if you're in that situation, I would say that you need to seek out people that know what they're talking about, firstly, and can give you sound advice. So as an astrologer, I'd be saying this is a pretty high peak period of volatility. From a geological perspective, I've spoken on this in previous videos. These are my key areas to watch for with regards to volcanic and earthquake activity, which then also could trigger subsequent tsunamis, which would be the west coast of South America, Peru, that Ecuador area, and sort of the west coast of the USA to a degree. The Tonga Islands, Vanuatu, and New Zealand, when it comes closer to home here across Australia. Indonesia / up through the Polynesian, not the Polynesian, into the Philippine area. The Greece, Italy area in particular. So those are my spots to watch for geological changes. Again, if there was something like that that was going to be indicated by astrological alignments, then I would say this period of time could be a trigger for the releasing of that energy, and that we should expect the unexpected. So if you're in any of those areas, it's not about panic. It's not about trying to prepare. It's just about being aware. Now, if you're in a particular area and all of a sudden some weird things start happening within nature, all of the birds all of a sudden go quiet, or they all fly out of the trees and disappear, or the next thing dogs start howling, or it just has this eerie feeling or sense, pay attention to that, tune in to that. As a general bit of guidance for this next 2 to 3 week period in particular, especially the peak period between sort of 19th, 20th, 21st of May, simplify things, come back to what really matters, keep it really simple, stay grounded, stay present in your moment, stay local, keep it really local. Practice grounding and presence, whether that's through meditation or just being in nature a lot. Just have awareness. There's going to be a heightened sense of volatility. People are probably more likely to be on edge. There may be news that breaks that triggers people to react a certain way. So, become aware and be the sort of rock or the light through the darkness, if that's the case. Let's take a look at Australia's birth chart. So every nation has a birth chart. In this particular case, I'm going to use the Australian Federation chart, which is the 1st of January 1901, 1:35 p.m. Sydney. This is a chart agreed upon. Now, yes, was this, in this relation to the first settlement in 1788 when Captain Cook supposedly landed? No, that's a different chart. Is this the chart for the custodians or the first peoples of this land? No, there's a different chart for that. This is more in relationship to the Australian Federation. It was like the creation of a nation. So this is the chart we look at when we look at like us as the people as a general. So yes, there are different charts you look at for different things, but this is the one that I choose that is widely accepted as the birth chart of Australia in what we call modern Australia. The interesting thing about this is we've got 29-degree Aries rising for our sign. Now, the rising sign, all of that ascending point on any birth chart is a very critical, sensitive point, as is the midheaven, the IC, and the descendant point. And the interesting thing about this birth chart is that the eclipse happened right on the ascendant for us, which was the April eclipse, right on the ascendant, the Australian ascendant. So that was an interesting alignment. I was like, oh, wow, this next 6-month period is going to be pretty volatile. Other people, because the first house in a nation chart rules over the people and their predisposition. So are the people being eclipsed here? Are we being eclipsed by something? Are we being overshadowed in some way or another? It's very possible. But this alignment in particular is pretty significant. So if we go through to there, we have Pluto 0 degrees Aquarius 9th house conjunct the midheaven. Mars 0 degrees Leo 3rd house conjunct the IC, right, the immanuality, and Jupiter at 1 degree Taurus conjunct the ascendant. So we have these powerful energies on the dynamics of our chart, which are these critical degrees, the MC, the AC, or the ascendant and the IC, with the South Node over here in the 7th house. 7th house rules international disputes and war and conflict with, other people, other nations. The 3rd house is our neighbors. It's also our media. The 9th house is our foreign relations. The 2nd house is the money and wealth of the people. The 4th house is our land, our homes by extension. The 5th house is the stock market and the entertainment aspect of our reality. We also have the 3rd house as being the education, and the 9th house being the teachers, the 6th house being the workers. Also, all of the industries like your police and your ambulance and all of those service industries are all the 6th house. 7th house rules marriages and divorces. The 8th house is death and taxes. We've spoken about the 9th. The 10th house is the political party that governs. The 4th house is the opposition party. So whoever's in political power, we've got Pluto moving across the midheaven over the next year or two. So, you know, and that's also our public reputation within our global community as well. So going through massive, massive changes. The 11th house is the legislator and the parliament. It's also our foreign dignitaries. The 12th house rules over our prisons, our hospitals, our morgues, our secret enemies. So in this particular instance, the things to watch out for is, yes, this aspect really hits the Australian chart. So coming off the back of that solar eclipse, you know, I'd just be like, what exact changes can we expect? We're also going through Uranus that's coming into conjunction with the moon. The last time Uranus sat on Australia's moon was 1940, and that was around the time of the Second World War. It's interesting to note that Pluto in 1940 or 1939, at the beginning of World War II, was in, you know, 0 degrees of Leo, exactly opposite with where it is right now. So, you know, do things tie back to that? Could we expect war to break out? Are we going to be involved in some foreign conflict? What's going to happen to our stock market? What's going to happen to the wealth of the country? What's going to happen to the banking sector? Are we going to face some sort of natural disaster? Is there going to be an increase in sort of, you know, cataclysmic events? Like, yes to all and no to all. It's very possible. My sort of intent with this video is to bring awareness to, like, the sky clock is showing us the time. It's up to us to interpret that. So awareness is preparedness. It's not about alarming. It's about being aware, being present. I've given you the advice on what to do, which is to connect, right? Stay very present, stay very aware. Wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, that's where you're meant to be. It's how you respond to what happens that counts. It's not about what happens or preventing it or whatever. That's the place we need to be able to get to. It's just not about what's going on out in the world. It's about our response to what goes on out in the world. And when you can start to cultivate that inner peace, that inner sort of alignment, that inner groundedness, you're able to much better respond to circumstances outside of you. So that's my advice for this particular alignment that's coming up, is awareness equals preparedness. And this is your video as your reminder only. So on relation to that, I'd be interested to know what you think, what you see. If you've got information that can sort of help understand this astrological alignments, this is a community where we encourage this sort of, you know, open discussion around these types of things. I don't have all the answers. My job is just to sort of bring awareness. And even when I'm doing my personal readings for people, it's about helping them understand what they don't see, helping them look at themselves, their lives, and their challenges in a different perspective, so that they can get the awareness to overcome those challenges, to move through them, to climb over them or around them, or whatever that might be, to help them to fully fulfill themselves in their life, to bring back that personal power. So that's my intent with these. Now, as a side note, I'm also running a course on Chakra Awakening, helping you tune into the chakras within your energetic system, giving you practical ways to understand them and how that relates to physical life experience. So it's no good just focusing on your physical chakra and trying to, you know, do meditations to awaken it. If the experience in life that resonates at that chakra frequency is not being addressed also. And astrology can help us understand that, because we can look at the planetary energies that best align to each of those chakras, and we can use the birth chart as a guide to go, what are the types of experiences energetically that can challenge us, block us, and inhibit us in relation to each particular chakra. So it's Chakra Awakening. The course is going to start on the 24th of May, right around this particular period, but we have moved into Gemini season, and Gemini is about learning and openness and curiosity. And this course is going to run for 4 weeks right through Gemini season. All details are below through the link in my website. You can book tickets to secure your place. Thank you for your ongoing continued support. I wish you all the best. Please reach out if you're in need of any support. Peace out, guys.